Hey guys, welcome into 19 on the Clock, your home for high school and college athletics right here in the Cincinnati Tri-State. I'm Jackson McCarty, and as you might know, I'm typically joined by my co-host Brad Pushkar. I'm alone for part of this podcast today, but not all of it. So we're going to take a look at the Indiana high school basketball team, both on the girls and the boys side of stuff, but that'll be coming around here in just a second. What we want to start with, Jeremy Rauch was kind enough to sit down with me and talk a little bit ahead of Ohio State and Notre Dame's national championship game on this upcoming Monday. Let's take a listen. Hello and welcome back to 19 on the Clock. I'm Jackson McCarty, and usually I've got Brad next to me, but today I've got a local legend, Jeremy Rauch. What's going on, buddy?
Come on, man. It's great to be on the podcast, man. You know, I know you guys are doing great things with that and with this show and everything that's going around with it. And it's one of those cool things because our station has wanted to have something like this, a platform like this, for a long time, and it's like the perfect marriage for you and for Brad as well to do it because you guys both love sports. You're very knowledgeable. And when we're running around doing so much else, I love that you guys were able to kind of hold it down here and have this platform.
Yeah, well, and that was one of the big things whenever this started to kind of come to fruition, like talking to you and Joe and being like, I see y'all on a day-to-day basis running around like your hair's on fire because we are in a wealthy sports area. You know,
Yeah.
There's not a season that's not filled.
Right.
And so to help lighten that schedule a little bit, we can take a little bit off your hands, but had to rope you in for this one because the Buckeyes are in the big one.
Yeah.
You know, going up against Notre Dame, going to be a big time. You guys are going down.
Yeah.
So before you guys head down, you know, how are you feeling just about getting to witness all that?
It's really cool for me just to pull the curtain back a little bit. You know, I grew up in Central Ohio, and so obviously I grew up going to Ohio State football games when I could. It's expensive. But it's certainly a big part of my upbringing. And so now working in Cincinnati and working in an area that obviously has a lot of Buckeye fans and Notre Dame fans as well, I'm well aware of that. It's crazy for me just professionally now to be able to cover a second national championship for the Buckeyes. I was there for the 2014 title in the first year of the 14 playoff when Ohio State won it all against Oregon. Obviously when Ohio State played Bama in the COVID year, we didn't travel for that one. And Bama's super team ran all over the Buckeyes. Devontae Smith
Picked a great year to miss, and you guys might be the good luck charm.
It might be that. So but it is. I mean, for me and where I come from and my upbringing, and now professionally being able to cover an Ohio State championship game a second time in my career, second time in the last decade or so, is a bit of a dream come true. But it's going to be a fantastic trip for us to go to Atlanta. I mean, you couldn't ask for more than these two brands, right? Ohio State and Notre Dame, especially, again, as we've talked about the interest in this area, in the Cincinnati area, it's a pretty cool thing.
Absolutely. Well, one thing's for sure, it's better that you're in the seat and not Reagan, you know, with that little bit of background there. But
you mean the Oregon background?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, look, you know, all in good fun. Reagan got her regular season win.
Yes.
But Ohio State deals pretty well with Oregon in the playoffs usually.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and that trend continues. But all right, so kind of talking about that game, you know, it's been I think it's fair to say, wild run for the Buckeyes through this playoff bracket. What of the three games they've had so far has been the most surprising to you?
You know what? I actually am this is probably going to surprise a lot of people. I was most stunned by the Tennessee outcome.
Yeah.
Reason being is that when you lose like you did to Michigan, and everyone in the world everyone around Columbus and a lot in Ohio wants to see Ryan Day leaving after you lose a fourth straight to Michigan. And it's inexplicable the way this team was constructed for them to lose that way. And Ryan Day, sometimes his teams can be a bit of a head case. He can be a bit of a head case when things go wrong like that. How does he respond? And it can go one way or the other. And I wasn't sure emotionally what kind of Ryan Day we would see, what kind of team we might see against Tennessee in that first playoff game after losing to Michigan that way. So I was the most curious about how they would respond. Did I know they had the talent to go out and do it? Yes. Did I believe that they were a better team than Tennessee? Sorry, I know your fandom.
It is what it is. It's okay.
I did believe that they were more talented than Tennessee. Everyone outside of Tennessee might have felt that way as well. But it's one of those things where how are they going to respond? I could not believe, Jackson, they responded that way in that game. And that set the tone. Because then going into the Oregon game, we can talk about that as well. Yeah. I said to anyone who would listen, I'm confident Ohio State's going to win this game by double digits. Based on talent, based on having lost to them by one in the regular season, all those things kind of baked into that. And what we had seen against Tennessee, in that kind of a matchup, I felt better about that game than I did the Tennessee game.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and across the board, like Ohio State, so many people were saying this is the most talented roster, bar none, in college football. It was just about putting those pieces together.
Yes.
And like you said, that Tennessee game was proof positive that they can put those pieces together and make the run they did.
Yeah, that was it. And it was also the way Tennessee's constructed. They have a pretty good run game. They're very physical at the line, and I'm thinking in my head, this might mirror the Michigan game if Tennessee can play the way they want to, and they couldn't. But you're right. Look, this roster largely was bought for this kind of a run, and it wasn't just bought. There's been a lot of talk nationally about Ohio State paying to bring in all kinds of transfers. That wasn't the case necessarily. They paid a lot of money to keep guys around, guys that were on the fringe and thinking about, am I going to go pro or not? Guys like Kyle McCord, who walked into Ryan Day's office and said, I want this amount of money to stay or I'm gone. And Ryan said, have a nice life. There were those conversations that we know happened around Ohio State. But a lot of the money they spent, a lot of the reason why people thought they were going to win it all is because guys like JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Travion Henderson and all those guys, they come back. They pay that money to them so they can come back to get guys like Caleb Downs and others that are big stars on the team. But it's really just about this team wanting to come back to try to win the whole thing. They failed at winning a Big Ten title and beating Michigan, we know that. But it's quite a story for them now to be where they are on the precipice of winning a national title for the second time in the last 10 years or so. And doing it after losing to Michigan is the unique wrinkle of the 12-team playoff.
On top of that, their best offensive player, I think pretty inarguably, is a freshman wide receiver.
Yep.
And with all those key components, I mean, JTT and Sawyer have been top 60 draft picks in the minds of most for going on 3 years now, this being the third cycle. So, yeah, returning all those guys has been astonishing.
Jeremiah Smith is, to see what he has done and to match him up with an Ohio State legend like Chris Carter and realize that the numbers he's putting up mirror that and have broken records as well. Jeremiah Smith's season has been incredible. And then you look at their second best option in Emeka Egbuka. He is currently projected, latest I saw, to be around the 22nd, 23rd overall pick. The Steelers on one draft board I saw would get Emeka, which I'm sure Bengals fans would love. But you have Jeremiah Smith, who is going to be, if he trends this way, at least the next 2 years, top 5, top 10 pick. No doubt about it, right? A Marvin Harrison kind of pick as well, maybe better than that. And you have Emeka Egbuka, who is also a first-round receiver, and all the other wealth of talent they have. Even Carnell Tate as their number 3 is very dangerous. So it's a team that was built to win the title, and now here they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's shift a little bit. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Buckeyes' defense and that front four that's been causing a lot of problems throughout this bracket. Notre Dame does have some answers, between Jeremiah Love as a back.
Right.
Riley Leonard's got some great legs to him. So what does Notre Dame have to do to get past what has been a very daunting defense?
Somehow, if Notre Dame can do it, and I'm not sure if they can, but I think the best way to somehow, you can't stop what Ohio State's going to do pressure-wise. You can't stop JTT and Jack Sawyer and all of that, but somehow they have to get them lateral. They have to spread them out. They have to make them think a little bit. Riley Leonard is one of those guys that is going to, have that ability. He is probably the biggest running threat at quarterback that Ohio State has faced all year long, in my opinion. The way that he runs the ball, how many design runs he has. Jeremiah Love is also a nice weapon for them, but they have to spread them out. Try to get screens out, try to get the ball out quick to the perimeter, and just make Ohio State have to think a little bit about how they're going to attack and pressure and rush and all that. I don't know if that's good enough, but I think that's one way that they can attack the Buckeyes and at least slow down a bit of that pass rush they're going to get, a bit of that great run defense, which is phenomenal for Ohio State. They have to somehow stretch them out. Now, even in doing so, you have a guy in Caleb Downs who is arguably the best safety in the country, who can get to the ball so quick. Ohio State's corners have been really good. Their linebackers, Cody Simon, they have been phenomenal at getting to the ball. But to me, it's just somehow how can you kind of spread them out a little bit, work to the perimeter, and try to get a couple of plays that way. Not any big monster plays are going to happen probably against the Buckeyes defense, but you have to find ways to get those little edges. And if you can muddy up the game somehow, some way, a la the Michigan game, even the Texas game against the Buckeyes, then you're in that game, then you're putting pressure on their defense and making them think a little extra, and Riley Leonard's maybe making plays with his legs as well. That's the only way I can see they can somehow shake up the Buckeyes defense a little.
You've got to operate more in a West Coast system and less of an air raid. You know, you can't take those chunks out.
Right. And Riley Leonard's not a great thrower of the ball anyway, so he has to play that way, and I think that's the way they want to play. But I'm sure the Buckeyes will have a plan for that as well.
Absolutely. Now, on the flip side of that, we're just a handful of days off of Notre Dame. Tyler Warren, from Penn State, doing pretty much whatever he wanted to throughout whenever they targeted him. How much confidence does that give you for the Ohio State offense?
Yeah, I mean, look, the way Penn State likes to play, he's their guy, and he's the guy that always makes plays. But I think that the one thing that I would say going into this game is I'm not quite certain how Notre Dame is going to defend what Ohio State brings. And a guy like G. Scott, when you think about tight ends and the way they use G. Scott as well, it feels like Ohio State uses G. Scott whenever they want to. If they need him, they'll draw up a play for him, which is few and far between with their weapons. But the one thing I'm most curious about in this game, Jackson, is Notre Dame traditionally has played man-to-man.
Right.
I don't see a way that Notre Dame completely changes up their entire scheme and says, all right, let's go too high safety, let's shake things up, whatever it might be, to face Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate and G. Scott and all those guys that they can do. I don't see them completely restructuring their defense. So I'm most curious how that's going to work man-to-man, how they're going to match up. Can they match up against Jeremiah Smith's speed, against Emeka over the middle, or whatever it might look like, or even G. Scott at times? I don't believe they can, but I'm curious to see how they try.
Yeah, well, and it's an engine that kind of runs with or without the quarterback. I have some reservations about Will Howard, especially like at the pro level or whatever.
I would agree.
But with everything around him, it's kind of foolproof.
Yeah, and that's, it's funny. I have, my 10-year-old son will ask me, like, Dad, what do you think about Will Howard and, how, where he's going to go and how he's going to get drafted, what round? And the answer I give my son almost all the time is I don't know if he's an NFL quarterback. He has done a good enough job just being the right guy for Ohio State this year. Has he made mistakes in big games? Absolutely he has, no doubt about it. That's been maddening for Buckeye fans as well, but he's a great college quarterback in that he is able to make a lot of the throws you ask him to make most of the time. He's a pretty darn good runner, obviously a very physical runner. He's big, and he plays with a lot of fire and a lot of confidence. So he is the right guy in a lot of ways for Ohio State this year with all the talent they have. Will he play in the NFL? I don't know. Is he a late-round pick, 6th or 7th round, that maybe he's a backup somewhere? Possibly. But I would agree with you. He's not one of those guys that is going to be highly touted in the draft. It's going to be a little bit, I have started to, Jackson, compare this Buckeye team talent-wise a little bit to Alabama in 2020 with Mac Jones.
Yep.
Now, people thought a little higher of Mac Jones back then.
Right. He ended up being a first round.
Probably incorrectly so, right, as we've seen in hindsight.
He's backing up Trevor Lawrence.
So the point is made there, right? And he was surrounded with superior talent when you think about what they had, and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Najee Harris, and it's just like that team was unbelievable. Ohio State is in the same category. You might say that Alabama team was the Death Star, and the way they won and how they won that year, even in a COVID year, I would agree. But I think Ohio State is akin to that, where they don't need a quarterback to be a world beater,
right,
like a Mac Jones, and here's all this talent around it.
Yeah, if you're putting it in buckets, they're going in the same one.
Right.
Well, and especially this year, it's really not a quarterback-rich college landscape now. You don't really have many takeover guys. So Will Howard can get that job done, like you're saying.
Yeah.
The last one here. So it's been a couple months ago now, but I talked to Joe Danneman when it was Moeller-Princeton coming up. He gave me a score prediction, so I need one from you on this game.
Ohio State, Notre Dame? Ooh. Okay, so I feel like I've been pretty close actually throughout the playoff, except for the Tennessee game where I told you I was a little curious about how that would play out. I'm trying to remember what I said for the Texas game. I think I said 38-21 Buckeyes. That was not right. It was 28-14 in the end. But I felt like I was in a good spot based on how the game played out.
Pretty similar spread there.
Yeah, and I do think Notre Dame is going to just muddy this game up a little bit, try to slow it down, try to kind of pull the Buckeyes into the mud for a lot of this game. I do think Ohio State at some point will kind of start to hit and get that momentum. They're the best third-quarter team in the country, the way they play most of the season. So after wasting time for about 45 seconds, let me land on a score here. I'm going to go with I'm going to say, this is going to probably sound crazy to a lot of people, I'm going to say 45 to 24 Buckeyes.
Ooh.
I don't think it'll be that close in the end.
Going for the jugular.
I know that's going to sound probably crazy. I think it will be a little closer in the first half. Maybe it looks like something like 28-17 at halftime. I don't know what it'll feel like and look like there, but I do think that Ohio State is going to, at some point, hit the gas pedal, and it's too much for Notre Dame.
Kind of separate and near that end there and start getting the confetti ready.
Yeah, so maybe 45-24 is too much. I've watched Notre Dame play a lot. I've watched Ohio State play a lot. I don't see how Notre Dame can hang with the firepower.
Especially once the legs start getting tired.
That's a big part of it. The second half, I think, is when that game really changes and flips. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Jer, I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Anytime.
We'll have to do it again.
For sure.
For the next national title game, right?
I'll be there. Yeah.
Thanks again to Jeremy for coming on to the podcast today. And like I said, we're going to be doing Indiana boys and girls high school basketball. There's 3 teams in total in our region that we typically like to cover, that being Lawrenceburg, Batesville, and East Central. So without Brad, I can't really do the selling points and the selecting who he thinks is going to be the best out of the state or anything like that. So what I've decided to do instead is kind of rank them in a sense of how their season has gone to this point and just give you a quick look at how each of these teams is performing as we sit in the middle of January. So at first, we'll start with the boys. We're going to Lawrenceburg, the Tigers. As of right now, they are 6-5. They have 1 win against one of our other tri-state teams to this point. They beat Batesville by 10, and I believe that their games against East Central are coming up in a couple of weeks, so we won't have to wait too long for that one. Right now, as far as looking at the roster, JP Izzo and Noah Kay, both of those guys averaging over double digits, and with Indiana basketball, forewarning, it is a little bit harder to get a hold of some of these stats, like we do have the access with Kentucky and Ohio. So these will be a little bit stripped back. I do apologize for that, but that is, just because of access. So Lawrenceburg, I would say to this point, has been the best basketball team in Indiana in our viewing area on the boys' side. And number 2 would be Batesville. The Bulldogs are sitting just below 500 right now. They're 4-5. They do have a win over East Central. It was pretty early in the year. They beat them by 4. And then if you're looking at the roster, Braden Maple listed at 15.3 points per game. That's your bucket getter, but it's a sneaky deep offense. They've got 4 guys in total, including Maple, averaging more than 10 points. So as far as what you're worried about whenever you're going to play the Bulldogs, it's going to be that offensive presence and where all those points are going to be coming from. And then the last one on the list, East Central, the Trojans, they're 1-7 right now. Their lone win was to open the year against Milan, and it was 62-60. Since then, they've gone on an 0-7 run, still trying to figure some stuff out as the season progresses, but right now in a little bit of a cold stretch. Peyton Hoffer is the primary name you're going to need to know whenever you're watching the Trojans play ball. Averages a little over 12 points per game and about 4 rebounds a game. So he's certainly a good talent, certainly kind of leading that roster, but they are looking for a little bit more in terms of what's surrounding it, what other pieces and who's going to be able to step up if Peyton's not quite having the game that he needs to be having to take over for the team. We'll go over to the girls' side now, and this one is a little bit more lively, I guess is the way I'm going to go ahead and describe it. Batesville leads us over here. They are 11-6 to this point in the game, or in this point in the season. They beat Lawrenceburg by 12 points, and 4 of their 6 losses have been in single digits. So when you're sitting down and looking at it, it's a lot of games that were kind of more of a coin toss. It might be more of a 7 or an 8-point game where you're starting to kind of get away from that, but a lot of times that's still end-of-game free throws and whatnot. So even when they do lose, more often than not, it's going to be relatively close. And then when you're looking at the win side of stuff, 7 of their 11 wins are double digits. So you know that you're going to get a high-powered offense trying to separate that a little bit. Their defense is performing pretty well as far as I'm aware. So they're a really well-balanced team. They've, just had a couple games that didn't quite fall the way they were hoping for. Number 2, we'll go with East Central, moving up from 3-2 on the girls' side of stuff here. They're 8-7. They beat Batesville by 7, so they do have a win over the one that I'm putting out in front of right now. But their big issue right now is they've been running pretty hot and cold throughout the year. The schedule goes as following: 4 wins, 2 losses. 1 win, 3 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, a win. So they usually win or lose in bunches, which is something you do have to be concerned about, especially if you're running on that colder side going into brackets and playoffs and things of that nature. But overall, they can definitely give you a big issue on their best day. I'm really interested in a pair of young athletes for the team. You've got Natalie Stenger, who's averaging 11.6. She's just a freshman. And then Audrina, I believe, Dugan, 9.1 points per game. She's a sophomore. Now, those two could be a very fun duo over the next couple of years before Dugan graduates and could really grow into something special there. But age, is still ahead of them. They've still got some time to improve and develop and grow. And so while this year might not be the year that I'm so locked in on the Trojans on the girls' side of stuff, still absolutely a team to watch, especially as we continue to march on. And then lastly here, Lawrenceburg, 5-7. So you're really not just too far behind the 8 ball there, but obviously a couple more losses than you want. They started 4-1, but they've struggled to find that form since then. That's kind of been the trick, similar to East Central running hot and cold, but Lawrenceburg has just kind of went from a real good start at the beginning to just tapering off to a point where they're kind of struggling to find footing. Players you need to know, Cameron Ferreira, she averages over 10 points a game. Aubrey Labazzo, 9.4 points per game. Natalie Kay, 9.3, and then 7 boards. So you've got a real dynamic player there that's helping out in multiple areas. They've got a really good balance, but I think the issue for them right now is that they don't have that 1A type player. They don't have that takeover role, somebody who can step up at the end of the game and you put it in their hands and you just say, handle it, make sure it happens. That'd be something that hopefully as the season continues to progress, one of those 3 girls can just continue to elevate into that kind of role. But right now, I do think that's a big reason that they sit at 5-7 and below that 500 mark. So that's what we're looking at for Indiana basketball. We'll start Kentucky high school basketball next week, taking a look at some of the best performers in each, not conference, but classification. And we'll have Brad Pushkar back, so we'll have more college and football and basketball to talk about as well. But this is going to be a shorter episode. Indiana just kind of buzzing through it. Again, thanks to Jer for sitting down, helping us out here. But yeah, we'll catch you next week. Have a good one.